Once upon a time, in a place not far from where you are now, was a place like no other, a place where smoking was the norm. Everybody smoked. Well, I shouldn't say that. I didn't smoke, but I was the only one I knew who didn't. This town was actually more like a kingdom. I say that because the people who lived there were more or less led by this guy, Don, or as everyone called him, the SmoKing. Everything the SmoKing did revolved around or was dictated by the act of smoking. And as loyal subjects do, his followers took his example to heart, especially the king's court, otherwise known as the smoking circle. The circle was an eclectic mix of people, different ages, backgrounds, social status, all brought together by their reverence of smoking. There's Tracy, the exotic cigarette girl, always hawking the newest and rarest smokes to the king or anyone else. Don's appetite for tobacco had grown exponentially with his age, and he frequently relied on Tracy to provide him with a fresh fix and steady supply. Of course, the king had first dibs on the newest and best products, and in exchange for the social perks that the role brought her, Tracy was more than happy to oblige. The king's house was a frequent gathering place for the circle. They'd party or just hang out, smoking and basking in the glow of their monarch. Don loved, or at least happily tolerated their presence and the feeling of power it brought. Did I mention Don and I lived together? You might think it ironic, but we were both left parentless at an early age and grew up as close friends. I knew a side of Don most of the rest never saw. Don actually enjoyed the fact that I didn't smoke, almost as much as he enjoyed a good-natured ribbing about it. It was the rare week that I didn't get hit with his "I've got Prince Albert in a can" joke. My vice was food. As religious as Don was with his cigarettes, I had become with cooking. At times it could be stressful being so different from everyone else, and I would work my frustrations out in the kitchen. I took pride in my educated palate, blending flavors until a dish was perfect. The appreciation was pretty much lost on Don, though. His tastes were dictated first and foremost by another power. I was always pretty sure that he wasn't mocking me, so much as remaining faithful to that which had brought him his glory. Not only did we share a house, but we had both learned the same trade and had eventually opened our own shop together. Whatever passion I held back from my cooking, I put into my work. Don was an accomplished artist as well, but he often acted as though he relished our line of work simply because of the smoking-friendly environment it provided. It was in the studio that his devotion to cigarettes could get on my nerves. To him, the art and the smoking were inseparable. But it was also there that our close-knit, albeit slightly dysfunctional relationship that had begun in childhood was continually forged. I did enjoy some social benefits because of my friendship with Don. When the king wasn't around, I entertained whoever might be hanging around the house. I welcomed the opportunity to showcase my talents in the kitchen, especially to such attractive guests. At times like this, I could almost forget how different I really was. But as wonderful as they were, such occasions were usually short-lived, as Don's arrival always reminded me of my true place in our society. The lady's attention quickly shifted to the new focal point of the scene, and I was all but forgotten. I understood they had fallen under Don's spell, each imbued with the idea that she might even for a moment become the object of the king's graces. Indeed, every king must have his queen, and Don had Roxanne. They deserved each other in many ways. Certainly no one else exhibited the same fervor for smoking, and their entire relationship revolved around it. Even sex. Especially sex. Don and Roxanne fed from each other's addiction and smoldered in the afterglow. Don was not the first SmoKing. He inherited his crown from the one who had come before him. Vince was without a son of his own and took Don under his wing soon after Don's parents had passed. Taught Don not just how to smoke, but instilled in Don a reverence and ritualistic respect for the vice. As Don grew, they spent more and more time alone, together, teaching, learning, smoking. Eventually there came a day when Vince was gone, and Don, now a mature and accomplished smoker, quietly and seamlessly took his crown. If smoking in our town was a religion, Jerry's place was its cathedral. Don's arrival at Jerry's was always met with a vigorous response from his subjects. In the friendship department, Jerry's relationship with Don filled whatever void might be left by my own non-smoking status. The king and queen always got the royal treatment here. By the very nature of their presence, they became the main attraction. Don would use a visit to Jerry's to get around, check in, and stay in touch with his people. As for me, I was on a friendly basis with most everyone. Although it was apparent that many didn't understand what I was all about, how anyone could resist the urge to conform. And so I often relegated myself to a solitary post, taking in the whole scene, observing the king in action. Like any ruler, Don felt an unrelenting responsibility to the town. A pressure that made him smoke more and more, to a ridiculous extreme. And one day it became obvious to me that something was happening to him. Exactly what, I wasn't sure. It was as if the wanton excess of tobacco consumption had begun eating away at him from the inside, affecting his body, even his mind. Things started getting stranger around the house. Don became isolated at times, as if consumed by his vice, sinking into the black hole of tar and smoke he had created within himself. Roxanne hardly noticed, intoxicated so absolutely on her union with him, but it was apparent that some bizarre transformation was occurring. On the outside of it all, Don seemed to function normally. He went about his usual routine, showing no signs that anything was wrong. And even as my concern and curiosity grew, I resisted the temptation to ask him about his erratic behavior. If anything was wrong, the circle certainly hadn't noticed. Don carried on as intrepid ruler, his subjects close behind. Things all came to a head one night at Jerry's place. Don was in full character, and as amused as I was by his antics, I couldn't shake the feeling that something unusual lay in store. It was as if some kind of unspoken signal had reached his court, exacting his influence upon them, for the entire place was like an unstruck match whose fire was immediately released by the spark of his entrance. They all loved it at first, their king fawning over them, handing out smokes as some kind of twisted patronage. I looked on as they returned the attention with their own adulation. Characters of all kinds were on hand to pay tribute. Soon, however, the entire bar became ensconced in Don's growing dementia. He began collecting lit smokes, one after another, overdosing on his power and the very device that brought it to him. It was then that the tables turned. The crowd stared on as Don moved like smoke itself, as if possessed. It was a haunting yet fascinating sight. The onlooking crowd had no idea how to react until Don completely lost control. He was at the will only of his cigarettes and wishing only to drag anyone and everyone else into his sinking spiral of smoke. The court's awe quickly turned to disgust as they watched in horror. Don's mania reached a fevered pitch. He collapsed onto the floor, writhing and convulsing, enshrouded in a thickening sheath of smoke and flashes of spark, which seemed to come from Don himself, the transformation taking full hold of the SmoKing. Most recoiled in revulsion. Roxanne at last, broken free from her nicotine-induced denial, leapt to Don's side, but was immediately repelled by the force that gripped him. And then, as quickly as it had begun, it was over. Don emerged, clean, pristine, from his metamorphosis. Throwing down his smokes, casting off his crown, his reign extinguished. As I rose to meet the deposed leader, the rest followed his example, crushing the bonds that had enslaved them all. In those first moments of rebirth, Don felt all that I had lived through. We left the bar and exchanged more than words. Then he walked off, imbibing his newfound freedom. And that's the story of Don, the SmoKing. The king is dead. Long live the king.